Alright, in this video we're continuing our discussion of ARC Section 90A, and that's for the review of financial statements. And up until this point, or at least in the past couple videos, we discussed the accountant's review report, the general requirements for what to include in the report, and also how to modify it whenever the client has used a special purpose framework when preparing its financial statements. So now we'll take a look at the requirements when the financial statements show comparative financial statements, so that means maybe 2 years of financial statements. And how should we modify our review report when that's the case? And first we see that comparative financial statements might be required by the financial reporting framework, and typically GAAP recommends comparative financial statements. Therefore, management may elect to provide that information in their financial statements. So whenever comparative financial statements are presented, our accountant's review report should refer to each period for which the financial statements are presented. So in the introduction section of our accountant's review report, we would say we review the financial statements of, for example, 2018 and 2019, for example. But we've got a couple of different options here, depending on if the prior year was reviewed or by whom, or if it was audited, or what all we need to say in different circumstances. And so in the situation where we reviewed the prior year's financial statements as well as the current year's financial statements, and in that case we are a continuing accountant, and therefore we're reporting on all periods presented, because with this paragraph we say that we're supposed to include both periods in the report, then we should update the report on one or more prior periods presented on a comparative basis with those of the current period. And as we've seen in prior sections, we can't date the report earlier than the time where we've completed all of our procedures to obtain the limited assurance with respect to the current period. So when we're issuing an updated report, and that is we are saying in the current year's review report that we reviewed this year and last year, then we should consider information that we came aware of during the review of the current period financial statements to make sure that nothing is different, changes our mind about how we concluded on the prior year review. And so if during the current engagement, circumstances or events came to our attention that affected the prior period financial statements presented, then we should consider the effects on the review report. And in that case, our review report might not say that we reviewed the current year and the prior year, and that we're not aware of any material modifications that should be made. So next we look at what we should do if we've changed the reference to a departure from the applicable financial reporting framework. So if it turns out that when we update the report on the prior period financial statements to say that there is a departure from the applicable financial reporting framework, then in our current year review report we should include another matter paragraph that indicates the date of the accountant's previous review report, the circumstances or events that caused the reference to be changed, and when applicable, that the financial statements of the prior period have been changed. And finally, when it turns out that the prior period financial statements were actually audited, and the auditor's report on the prior period financial statements is not reissued, then our review report on the current period financial statements should include another matter paragraph, and that paragraph should say that the financial statements of the prior period were previously audited. It should include the date of the auditor's report on the prior period financial statements. It should also include the type of opinion that was issued on the prior period financial statements. And if the period was modified, then we should include the substantive reasons for the modification. And we should also include a statement that no auditing procedures were performed after the date of the previous report. That way we can say that we didn't perform any of the auditing procedures as part of our review engagement. So that makes up the modifications we need to make to our review report when we're or when the client provides comparative financial statements. So we have a couple of explanatory sections here, 86 through 89. So we can go down and take a look at those sections now to see some more details about how to do this. Okay, so now we're in the explanatory material section related to modifying the accountant's review report when the financial statements include comparative financial statements. And it says first that the level of information included for the prior periods in comparative financial statements is comparable with that of financial statements of the current period. So when they include comparable or comparative financial statements, the structure of the financial statements should generally be the same with the same balances and groupings and such, and the footnotes should be the same with disclosures that include both the current year and the prior year. And next, if it turns out that the firm who did the review in the prior year merged with another firm, and now the firm name is different and all that, then this says right here that it's acceptable for the new combined firm to accept responsibility and issue a review report on the financial statements for the prior period as well as the current period, and that it should be noted in the signature that a merger took place, and they may name the firm that it merged with. The next, they specify here that an updated report, this is the updated report on the prior year review, is issued in conjunction with the continuing accountant's report on the current period financial statements. And finally, a changed reference includes the removal of a prior reference or the inclusion of a new reference. I just want to specify here what they mean by change in reference to a departure from the applicable financial reporting framework.